Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, back in the day, there was a bit of a stigma on everyone's favorite herb, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things over here, and I mean, I'm assuming you do, you're listening to the podcast right now, you can subscribe to us basically wherever you find your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, it's all good. And plus, you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd love it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please give us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, lists, a little bit of TV, basically anything we can think of. But we love talking about the moving image, and we love it when you come pay us a visit to read about it. So please stop on by. On today's episode, we got an interesting one. We're diving into the Marijuana Conspiracy, which actually was a thing, believe it or not, and it tells the story of. It tells a story of something that actually happens, because it's based on a true story, and it is one of those things that you're not going to believe happens in Canada, but actually does. And it takes us to the year 1972, where a group of young women who, let's just say they're looking for a fresh start, and they sign up for a test study in isolated captivity in a 98-day human experiment studying the effects of marijuana on women. And this actually happened in Canada. And it's a really sort of interesting story, not just about the stigma around marijuana use and how it sort of has ramped down over the years, but just to see the beginning of all that, and just to see sort of the lengths that governments and people would go to try and destigmatize. Well, give it the wrong stigma, really, because, I mean, we forget, even back in the 60s and 70s, that, just for possession of a simple joint, it was a highly criminal offense, and people would spend real time in jail for it, which is a crazy thing. And we talked with the writer-director Craig Pryce about this, not just the inspiration for the film, but just sort of getting it off the ground, and sort of telling the story of these women who sort of willingly put themselves under isolation, and some of the experiences that they had there. And it's one of those things where you expect it to be one thing, but it really ends up being something else. And it's a fascinating little movie, and I definitely recommend you check it out on all the video on demand platforms now. And I hope you enjoy our talk with Craig, because I certainly know I did. It was a good one. Now, I mean, obviously, congratulations on the film. And I mean, full disclosure, when I first saw the poster and I first saw the premise, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be another pot comedy. All right, fine. And I started watching it. I'm like, no, this is different. This is something else. I'm like, and then I saw, wait, this is inspired. This is based on a true story. Like, walk me through sort of the origin of telling this story as a film.
Well, sure. Here, let me turn off my dinger there. So what happened was we had there was a true story that came out in the Star, and it was about what the movie's about, essentially. Diana wrote it. She's an investigative journalist there. And I just was developing stuff while I was working on the TV side of things to do an independent film, which I hadn't done in a while, and was really looking forward to, changing things up. And I just said, this is an amazing story. So I put it in my development pile. I was busy, and it kept rising to the top of the pile. So finally I said, I have a window here. I'm going to try and really delve into this. So I reached out to Diana, and she became a consultant on the film as well as an associate producer, and did some more research that was really great, and had a lot of research she'd already done. And then she actually got me to meet the women from the experiment, some of them. And that sort of sealed it for me, because they were just so fascinating and so helpful and truthful and open. And what I decided to do, because, being a true story, there's a lot of ethics if you care about how to tell it properly. So I told, because they were, I didn't use their name and I didn't use their exact character. I did a bit of composite charactering, but took all of their lives and stories, and fairly truthfully portrayed them as what happened to them on this journey. So that's where it got really interesting for me, because when make a fictional film is one thing, to make based on a true story and meeting the people that lived and went through that experience gives it a whole much more of a higher level of truth, and you could really sense what was going on in the time and what their journey was. So it really added a lot of layers to making the film. So that's sort of the backstory to it. And then when I looked at all that was going on top of this like crazy experiment, which we can talk about if you want, but also I just looked at the times and, sort of the social fabric, the mores, the laws. And I thought, well, this is such a fascinating time in our history. And it's all, and including some of the supporting characters around them. And so this all, at festivals, people are like, I can't believe this happened. And I said, well, it did, so it really made me interested in telling something. I'd never done a true story. I'd never done period. And when I looked at the subject matters and all the themes and all the what happened in that place and time, I just wanted to really make it a film.
Well, it's this interesting combination of, like you say, the time and just the people involved as well, because I mean, on many levels, this almost feels like a Heritage Minute gone very, very wrong. But it's one of those things where we see sort of all these confluences come together, and we see these women, and we see everyone there. And I mean, I'm kind of curious because I mean, you did allude to this a little bit, but there is this sort of difficulty that I always see, like in terms of, you want to stay truthful to what actually happened, but you will need to make tweaks along the way to make it work as a film. And I mean, I'm like, how do you sort of balance sort of the ebb and flow of that? Because I mean, I can imagine there may have been instances where it's like, okay, I got to go a little more fictional, or, oh no, maybe I'm a little less on the truth here. Like, how do you sort of strike the chord, really?
Well, it is a delicate balance. I mean, for me, the only thing that was weaved into it, and it was truth, is some of, like I say, the laws and the things that went on. I mean, I'll give an example because this isn't a spoiler alert, but back then, if you had possession of a joint, you went to jail for 7 years. It's hard to believe, but it's a fact. And so that's something you want to obviously integrate into the story. So it was taking other facts, and combining it with the experiment and the facts of the experiment. The experiment, we didn't have to change anything. That's exactly what went down. And the same thing with their lives. Like we didn't just say, well, let's make this happen to this girl because it's entertaining or because it's dramatic. No, these things did happen. And so it was easier for me because of how much of it had happened, for lack of a better word. So I didn't, there's things like we didn't, the non-smoking group, we didn't have time. I met some of them, but we did the control group. We didn't have time to bring them into the story because it was already 2 hours, but we took some elements of their experiences and it was integrated into the other side. So, but I will tell you this, and this is probably what I was very nervous about the Real Women seeing it, and they screened it Saturday night and I got some really positive feedbacks. One in particular who gave so much to this story and to her life to us. And she was really happy with the recreation of the look of it, but also just the characters she thought were fairly represented. And she also she said it was emotional for her, which means that it worked as far as the truth to it, etc. There was nothing like, oh, well, you guys went Hollywood on us, or, things like that. So that really helps me a lot to know that they trusted me and they were happy with the results by the end. So that was really nice to see. And also she just felt like it was like, and we do get a lot of compliments about the recreation of the look of 72. And she said it was really very accurate to what the institutional look and the brutalist architecture and, right down to the trays and, you name it, so that was nice to hear it and important to me, because when you're going to talk to them and represent them, you don't want to sit there and all of a sudden, change it. And the nice thing too was they had so much personality, and they had fun and they kept their sense of humor, and they, the adversity they faced, and so the heart of it is really this unlikely sisterhood of these women, these young women who had different lives and didn't know each other, and they all come together for this collective experience. And and like I say, and amongst that, they're in the middle of this experiment that's completely, not ethical, and there was no regulations and nothing to really protect them. So, they could leave, or that's one of the things like that Doreen talks about. Yes, you can leave, and they kept your money. If you didn't complete the 98 days, you worked for 92 days, and all the money you've earned making your Guatemalan belts and your macrame owls and things, you're shit out of luck, because they didn't want that to happen, because that would throw off their study and their data, which was funny because there was only 20 of them.
I mean, the other thing that really like just blew my mind from just a factual standpoint is because, I mean, obviously during that time, there have been stories before about experiments like this going on and yada, 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 but it was always over in that country, or it was always over there. Seeing it in Canada was almost sort of a jaw dropper. Can you walk me through sort of doing research and finding in sort of how this actually happened in Canada?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because yesterday I was talking with some American interviewers and media, and they said a similar thing. They said, well, we expect that to happen in America, but like, you guys are our cool cousins, and we didn't know you guys were up to shit too. And so, it was really interesting, because there is this folklore that Canadian Americans, and I go to Los Angeles a fair bit and things, and I have friends in the States, where we do everything right, and we're good people, and we're small, and we don't change the world, but we're honest, good people. Anyway, not all of us are, and we have governments that have agendas and things, and that's the research that was interesting, was that there wasn't ever an experiment on, for example, the effects of marijuana on women, but what they thought was that women were like, they become really promiscuous, and they do this crazy shit. They jump on their roofs naked and run around, like, it was like a really paranoia, and society just had this like really bad stereotype of marijuana, even in 70s. I mean, we all know Reefer Madness. It even makes a cameo in my film. But so it was dealing with looking again, and I don't want to give too much away, but where they were in 68 with certain civil rights, and where they were with laws. And so that was like, okay, this is incredible to tell this part of the story. And part of what came with that was things like this experiment, because what was happening was the Liberal government back then was Trudeau Sr., and because it was 7 years in jail as a class 1 narcotic, he thought that they'd look into and do tests with Ledane to report to see if maybe this has gone too far, and we could do something about it. Now, even there was a motive, which the end of the movie tells you about why they actually looked at making it more legal. I love that line or two about it. Putting that aside, the Ontario government, which John Roberts at the time, he was like, no way, I don't trust Trudeau, I'm doing my own study. And he got the Addiction Research Foundation involved. And so that backstory, and a lot of it, Diane researched for me, and which was great. But I just thought, wow, this is like, talk about polar opposites. And then they said, well, on top of that, we're going to do whatever we want to these people. And they started out like Barry, for example. He wasn't the physiological part of the experiment. He was a social anthropologist, and he thought he was doing a good thing. He thought this is a great study, and that you could take 10 and 10, and it was valid science for 98 days. And now it's like we end up spending 20 years with a control group of 20,000 aside. So it's really, a lot of that is what I was discovering along the way that really layered itself into the movie. And the nice thing is, a lot of people say to me, like, I learned something from this film, and I didn't know that happened. And so that's taking it to a new, or I really thought about some of the themes and what happened. And then the conversation goes further, because people talk about a lot of the stuff still happening today, which is unfortunate. But so it is like, there's an essence of entertainment, like, so the audience understands it. It's an entertaining film. It's a feature film, but it doesn't mean you can't learn something from it and think about it after. And I think that's from some of the Q&As and things I've had. I think it's succeeded.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. It is definitely something that will spark conversation, and just, aside from like the topic matter, I was really drawn into just the casting and like sort of the nature of the cast. It really did feel like a true ensemble piece. And I mean, even someone like Julia, I mean, I'd watch her read the phone book at this stage just because I think she's that good. Can you kind of walk me through
Yeah.
sort of the casting process to find the right balance of the right people that you wanted?
Sure. Well, we had John Comerford did casting for me because I work with him a lot. I didn't know what kind of turnout we would have because it was a lower budget indie film. We had some amazing actresses show up, like just, and some of them I know because I've done a lot of TV and film. But the layers, the level of talent that showed up for every role. So that was the first good news, and the next good news was some of our cast, like Julie and Morgan and all Marie who plays the nurse, like you just knew it was them. You just, when you heard it, and it just thought, okay, these people are, this is the role, and they all had distinct looks, which was important because they're all different women. And Luke came in, and so it became sort of a really great experience to have this level of talent and then hear people who nailed it. When you hear the words that you wrote and they just make it so believable and convincing. And Julie, for example, I knew obviously of her career, and I knew a director who just worked with her, so I just asked her to say self-tape in Vancouver, not knowing if she'd be interested, and she did so well. And then she happened to be in Toronto or something else, and she said she would be happy to come in and audition in person. And then so it was like really getting everybody I wanted to in the film, and some of them I knew, and some of them have never worked. This was Tamika's first role, and so it was like a real combination. And some of the young ensemble were new, and some of them were like kid actors who grew up, and so it was really great to take them all and know that I found them. It wasn't even like, and then some of them ones that were really close, I actually put them in smaller roles. I said, I know it's not a big part, but I just, they didn't even have to read. I said, you're so good, can you do this part in the film? And I even changed some of the people, like, Morgan read for one character, and then I changed it to the other. And it made sense because she was playing, well, I don't want to say which character because it gives it away. But anyway, so that was really one of the great things, is because when you write something, you just, you're always nervous to hear it. And I also would change things after auditions and then on set, even because it's my film. I said, you know what, if it's not quite working for you, or if it's not working for me, and it wasn't a lot of that because it became a pretty polished script for dialogue and things because of the passes and the feedback I got. But to give them all distinct voices was a challenge, but then to give them a distinct look was part of fulfilling that challenge. And I think that I'm very proud of all of them, and including, all of the support characters, every single person. I don't see a weak link. You write down, I don't say write down, but including the mental patients,
Right.
because they were so expressed so much without saying anything. They just acted so well with their look and their eyes and things. And and like Marie, who plays the nurse, like she hardly says anything in the first half, but it's really a compelling character, and you really want to get to know her and things. So I was really lucky to have an ensemble and support cast like I did.
And I mean, I really felt that with Derek's character as well, because it really allowed for us to sort of almost have a bit of a breaking of conventions kind of moment. And I mean, that feels what the whole film is about, just sort of breaking the sort of the misconceptions and conventions, not only around marijuana, but around sort of some of the testing that happened during these times, and some of the sort of attitudes that were going on, which were really very, very draconian, that really needed, that we're in the middle of a very sort of seismic shift at the time.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I had someone thank me just for just putting a light on all that. Because, one of the ladies actually said to me when I was talking to her, I said, well, did you feel like you could stand up to these people? And she said, no, we had no rights. We were just young women. We really didn't think we were allowed to speak up or stand up. And, and they get stronger as the film goes on, which is good. And again, not to give too much away, but they just felt like, well, we're just kids here, and I guess we trust these doctors and these scientists and these psychologists, or sorry, psychiatrists. So they were sort of like, well, whatever happens, happens, And it was interesting to hear that perspective, and now people are starting to have more of a voice, even younger people, and that's really important.
No, I'm curious, and this is something I always like to ask. Thinking back, is there like a moment or even like a movie or a TV show in your life that sort of was the pivotal moment for you to go, you know what, I want to be in this business?
You know what? I actually wasn't a big when I was a kid, I just see movies. It actually started I know the exact moment. I thought I wanted to go into theater or like theater acting. And I was like, well, there's not much to make there, and it's a hard thing to do. And I walked into my grade 13 guidance counselor's office and saw a book for York University Film School. I didn't even know they existed. I thought you'd have to go to California. There's no way I could afford that. And that sort of was like one of those fluky moments where you just see something and go, wait a minute, I could work behind the camera and maybe make a living at it. And even then, there wasn't really much going on in our industry. It was very small. David Cronenberg was making a few films, and I think we didn't really have the TV industry. It's like at all compared to what it is. Like it's crazy now. So I actually fell into that sort of epiphany, and then I fell in love with filmmaking, and then I fell in love with films because we would watch things like McCabe and Mrs. Miracle and Arc, Altman movies and all the European, all these different European filmmakers and stuff, Godard and stuff. So it was like a really great exposure, and also it became like an impossible goal that I thought, well, I'm going to try this, and I stuck with it and persevered. But I think that's sort of the moment that started me, where I almost fell into it and then liked it more than I thought.
Well, I love that. And I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, I'm always curious to hear how people sort of get started and get sort of going in this business. Cause I mean, I look at this film and like on the surface, like if this had been made in Hollywood, it would have been a thriller and people would have been running down corridors trying to get away from the bad guys, that kind of thing. But this allowed for sort of character layer, and this allowed for some genuine social commentary to sort of sit and let you think about it. And I'm kind of curious because I mean, we live in such a day and age where we are bombarded with film and content, but it's important to be able to still have independent productions like this one, to be able to sort of allow some of those layers that get put into these stories to simmer and to sit and let you think about it. And like, what's your perspective on that, just in terms of someone who works in TV and works in film and is trying to balance sort of the truth of the story versus the sellability of the content, if that makes any sense?
It makes total sense. First of all, it's the whole reason I made the film, was that I didn't want to fit this thing into a box. I wanted it to be out of the box. And when I'm telling a story about some of these characters, it's not the perfect arcs. It doesn't have a happy beginning, middle, and end. It's not, when I do TV, there's a lot of people involved, and there's a lot of people that have, well, for lack of a better word, agendas. So you have more restriction as a director. TV movies, you have a little more freedom, but it becomes more of a machine and a collective experience. And I thought I really missed indie films, and that's where I started with my horror films. And I said, I want to challenge myself, but I also want to make a film that just means more than just pure entertainment. Not that I don't think the film's entertaining, but I wanted to be able to have social commentary, and I wanted to have, things that would resonate. And it is harder and harder for independent films to get anywhere or be seen anywhere. It's a big companies. They're making big films. There's hardly any independent distributors, etc. And so I went into this thinking, I'm rolling the dice here. I'm going to make this. And I think that with a good story and good characters and good themes and commentary, not fitting into the Hollywood endings and all those things. And, it was scary, especially after COVID hit, because people weren't interested in talking or seeing anything at that time. Fortunately, the film got some, it did well at a couple festivals, but more importantly, one of the Canadian distributors, Vortex Media, really saw value in it, and then got it screened for Peter Golan at Samuel Golan Films. And ironically, they were like in my top 3 for quality independent distributors in the States. And it's a hard story to have Americans essentially pick up on the surface. Well, as a Canadian film, it's a small film. He really understood it. And so Goldwyn and Vortex are working together on the North American release. I trusted both of them, that they understood the film and liked the film. But sometimes the media goes, well, why is your film resonating with American festivals or with American distributors? And I go, because it's not really about a Canadian story or Canadian film. It's about a place and time and characters that people can relate to and learn from. And people want to know about the human experience, and they want to see things they don't know about that aren't necessarily safe or different. Parasite, not to compare these, but Parasite won the Oscar last year, and one of Goldwyn's films, Another Round, is nominated for International Film and Best Director. Like, so audiences, including in America, they don't, sometimes they get bored of the safe television or the predictable big blockbuster movie. And but it's never been more challenging for an independent film to find an audience. Even what they do with some of the streamers and things, how they just push the box office or the bigger titles so much further up the queue and things. People have to really find your movie. But so far, like, I'm really happy with where this has landed, because I feel Sam McGowan was known for for quality independent and art films. Well, this is a perfect place for it. And they do the work, and they do, they do have a brand, which is really high end. So, and again, they're working with Vortex and with the marketing and everything, and the trailers and things. So I really feel like I'm glad it's succeeding so far. Who knows what the journey is going to end, but it is really tough to make small films now without names. I mean, this is the challenge we have. We have a great ensemble, we have a great cast through and through, but we don't have the name, and I don't have a problem with that. Sometimes people want to see new actors, and they're very established, some of them, but they're not famous, and they might be famous, but some of them should be famous, and that could happen. But it was just really great to have this kind of environment to make a film with these kind of people. And so that was sort of like, I feel very much like I fulfilled that kind of urge to go back to where I sort of started. And it's been a really rewarding so far, and I hope it continues to be.
Well, I keep doing the good work, man, and thank you again for making a really interesting sort of slice of human history that says something but is also entertaining at the same time. I mean, it's going to be a slow burn, no pun intended, but I think it's going to be one of those films that people are really going to start to warm up to and sort of discover the more it's out there and the more people start hearing about it.
Excellent. Well, I'm thank you for supporting it and putting some spotlight on it. And let's fingers crossed,
touch wood, all that kind of stuff. And thanks again for the time today, man. I do appreciate it. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.